raise your hands who here loves drugs. No one loves drugs here? No. Well, okay, again, my name is James. I'm actually a pharmacist, so that's why I always ask this question. But today I'll be talking about how Bitcoin will impact healthcare in America. Now, this is my startup. It's called Howdy. You guys can scan the QR code and look at my startup if you guys want, if you guys are bored throughout the presentation. But basically what we do, we pass back drug rebates to consumers, and we invest our drug rebates into Bitcoin. We believe that Bitcoin is a great mechanism and tool to solving out-of-pocket prescription costs. So this is kind of the agenda of what I'll be talking about today. For the first couple sections, it's going to be a little bit dull. I'll be talking about drug spend in America. I'll also be talking about this industry that you've probably never heard of. It's called the prescription savings card industry. From there, we'll talk about what Howdy's doing. Then we'll get into the meat and heart of everything. How does Bitcoin really solve everything in healthcare? And last but not least, probably my favorite part of this whole presentation, we're going to talk about what healthcare looks like on the Bitcoin standard. So it's no surprise, the United States spends probably the most amount of money on healthcare per individual compared to every single country out there. I think we spend 2 times as much as the UK or Germany. Compared to Japan, we spend 3 times as much. But normally you would think if you spend more money, you get better outcomes. But in America, we rank dead last when it comes to obesity. We rank somewhere in the middle when it comes to cardiovascular incidents, such as heart attacks and strokes. And we probably rank on the bottom percentile when it comes to treating diabetes. Why is that? Well, the biggest reason is because in America, we have a lot of intermediaries that do a lot of value extraction. So the dollars that go from federal and state programs down to the provider level, a big chunk of that gets taken away. If you didn't know this, 100% of people will pay taxes in America, whether it's your property taxes, sales tax, income tax, but healthcare only really benefits 35% of the population. That's people who are 65 and older or people who are low income. What I'd say is the 65% or the working class of America, this population doesn't receive adequate coverage when it comes to insurance. This is the population that gets unrepresented when there's drug negotiations or drug negotiations with Congress or healthcare. Unfortunately, these are the people who are going to have to pay for medications out of pocket. Really cool statistic, probably not as cool, but at least for me, is that within 5 years, 7 out of 10 people in this room will need to pay for a medication. And the reality is in America, it's very common for you to buy prescriptions or medications out of pocket and not go through your insurance. Why is that? A lot of people don't know this, but in healthcare, there's a lot of middlemen out there, and they really profit a lot off every single drug claim possible. If you didn't know this, drug rebates, it's a very common tactic in our industry. Pretty much every stakeholder in the pharmaceutical industry gets drug rebates, but they never ever go back to the consumer. If you didn't know this also, 50% of our government spend into healthcare gets returned back as a rebate. And virtually every single drug on this market has a rebate. We use rebates to incentivize more volume of sales and purchases through different intermediaries. Here's a really quick graph, but you can see this is a Medicaid program. Since 2014 to 2017, about 55% or a little bit over 50% of government spend gets reallocated to rebates. Just kind of keep this chart in the back of in your mind. I'll come back to it a little bit later. So quickly transitioning over to the prescription savings card industry. It's probably one of the biggest rent-sinking industries in America. But in a nutshell, it's basically this little card that you take to the pharmacy that lowers your price of your drug. What a lot of people think or don't know is that this is probably the most lucrative business you could possibly be in, but also the most rent-seeking. And we'll take a quick journey as a customer to sort of help you understand what this industry really does. So that's you on the left, or right, I guess. And then we'll pretend that's me, the pharmacist, but a male version. So you're going to come to me and say, hey, I need to buy drugs. I'll tell you, that's $500. And you'll say, well, that's fucking ridiculous. I ain't going to pay $500 for that. That's a highway robbery. Then I'll say, hey, look, I got this little membership card here. It's GoodRx. It's going to lower the cost of the price of your medication. It's going to end up costing $20. Now you're thinking, wow, I just saved $480. That's a fucking steal, right? Well, sounds good in theory, but what a lot of people don't realize is where that $20 is going to be allocated to. Half of that will go to the pharmacy, $2 will probably go back to the manufacturer, and $8 will mysteriously go into the pockets of a prescription savings card operator. That's kind of crazy. It goes to a third-party intermediary that doesn't do anything that has any involvement with the pharmacy operation itself. In fact, this model is so lucrative, you've heard probably Mark Cuban come into this industry about a couple of years ago. And don't believe all the shit that you hear on the news about how he's changing the whole industry, he's doing this as a selfless cause. He actually makes a lot of money off independent pharmacies, charges them 15% for every transaction he brings through. Doesn't manage any employees, doesn't do any of the labor, doesn't even hold inventory. So if you own a pharmacy, or you're looking at this and saying, well, why do I have to lower my drug price and then pay a commission to someone else? Wouldn't it just make sense for me to just lower my price and forego me paying a transaction fee or a commission to a third party? Well, it turns out that the prescription or the pharmaceutical industry is very legally inefficient. There's something known as a most favored nation clause. A better way to put this is a best pricing clause when it comes to contracts. Pharmacies do not operate on a free market in the United States. They are not allowed to bill walk-in customers a lower price than what they bill the government. An example of this is in the 1990s. You had big box chain stores like Target. They ran a $4 generic program while they were billing the government $50 for the same exact drug. Well, payers were not very happy about that, and they said, why are you charging us more for this drug and you're charging other customers much less? We want to claw back all the payments we've made for the past 2 to 3 years for this. So as a general matter or general principle, business matter, businesses or pharmacies do not charge people at different tiers. They bill everyone at a uniform rate. The legal loophole around this was the prescription savings card, hence this whole rent-seeking industry. What we've done at Howdy is taken this exact same industry and decided to return the transaction fees as well as the rebates we get on the back end to our customers. We work with over 35,000 pharmacies in all 50 states. That's roughly about 50% of pharmacies. And basically, you can get Bitcoin back on every prescription refill that you get. So I'll kind of jump into why this is so important, what we're doing. But what's really powerful and impactful about what we're doing is that Bitcoin allows for microtransactions to occur. If you were to buy a $10 drug through us, you get 3% back. That's 30 cents. How do I give you 30 cents back in today's financial system? It's impossible. Postage and handling is already double. If you want to do an ACH payment, that'll be anywhere from $0.25 to $1.50. Now extrapolate this towards millions and millions of prescriptions for millions and millions of people. This is a huge bottom line for a publicly traded company like GoodRx, or even for celebrities like Mark Cuban. Bitcoin allows for value to be redistributed back into the hands of patients and consumers. What's really cool about Bitcoin through Howdy is that we're actually empowering no-coiners to actually take possession of Bitcoin. What we tell a lot of our customers is that you don't have to understand Bitcoin whatsoever. We're just going to give it to you. It's an asset. We believe it's the future of money. Check it out in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. Maybe that 30 cents is worth more than your prescription that you paid for. Maybe it's worth a prescription and a couple of refills. I don't know. But we're giving access to a lot of no-coiners, and I think that is really the most key benefit part. It's very difficult to try to convince someone to buy Bitcoin. But if you give it to them away for free and say, hey, just check it out in a few years, I think that's probably the right message and way to go. The third reason of how Bitcoin will impact healthcare is that Bitcoin promotes delayed gratification. Financially, a lot of doctors will forego a huge salary because of their medical training. It aligns with doctors and physicians and pharmacists in terms of how they take their salaries and how they will view future payments. Likewise, when it comes to your medical conditions, a lot of people have to work on it for a very long time. What I really love about Bitcoin is that it promotes this delayed gratification mindset. This is a little bit more theoretical, but if you recall back in one of my previous slides, that 50% of our drug spend gets received back as a rebate, at least on the government side. You're starting to see larger publicly traded companies like Semler Scientific start to get into this where they're taking Bitcoin on their treasury. Well, I do believe there's a future where a lot of pharmaceutical companies may end up wanting to take Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And in lieu of that, they might forego taking drug rebates. And if there's less drug rebates, that means there's less money being printed. But probably my favorite example of why I love Bitcoin impacting healthcare is that Bitcoin creates a zero net cost opportunity for prescription drugs. We've been running Howdy since about early of last year, and we've been able to offset our customer costs by 10% already. We envision a future where Bitcoin can actually offset the complete cost of prescriptions. So we'll go into the last part of my discussion. What does Bitcoin, or what does healthcare look like on the Bitcoin standard? I realize I messed up the slide with it, but this is lisinopril. Oh, bummer. It didn't format correctly, but this is lisinopril. It's a very, very popular blood pressure medication. I'd probably say top 10 in America. For the past, I would say, few years or so, it's maintained a relatively normal price. But in terms of the Bitcoin standard, definitely getting a lot more affordable and cheaper. Here's Adderall. Adderall's used for ADHD. Fun facts, after the post-pandemic, there has been more diagnoses of ADHD than ever before. But we've seen Adderall actually reach a shortage this past couple of years, and the price of it has gone up. On the Bitcoin standard, things are definitely getting cheaper. Here's a Ventolin. It's an inhaler. Maybe you guys use it or not. It has been going down in price, but also on the Bitcoin standard, it's getting a lot cheaper as well. Most people will spend about $1,500 annually on out-of-pocket prescription costs. What does that look like on the Bitcoin standard? It's definitely getting cheaper. The average deductible has been going up since 2019. What does that look like on the Bitcoin standard? It's definitely getting a lot more affordable and cheaper. The average copay, it's roughly stayed and trended the same, but again, on the Bitcoin standard, it's definitely getting a lot cheaper. Last but not least, I really believe in the power of drug rebates and using Bitcoin as the right vehicle to do so. I do believe that 30 cents of Bitcoin today will potentially be worth a lot more in the future, and that's the best way to solve out-of-pocket prescription costs. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, James. We've still got a few more minutes, so I'd like to take a question. There's a hand straight up. Okay, go ahead, Rado. Why are drugs in the US so much more expensive than in the other countries?
A lot of it comes down to what I call intermediaries, people who are middlemen. They will manage benefits or manage the flow of funds or money. That's probably the first part. The second part is this is the largest taxpayer subsidized industry, and people who fall under the taxpayer subsidized programs, they don't have to pay for anything, but the people who are in the working class, they're kind of left to paying retail price for things. On top of that, the people who are in the working class, they don't get drug rebates when they have to pay for medications out of pocket, as opposed to the federal government or state government who's running these programs. They're the ones that get these rebates.
Were there any other questions about the American healthcare system, which seems like, yeah, it's you taught us a lot there.
I know it's a lot to digest for sure.
Now, I think many of us have probably heard on other Bitcoin podcasts the crowd health idea. Which do you work with those guys? Is this kind of collaborative? You all come into Bitcoin with your own kind of spin on things?
What Crowd Health is doing is, first of all, really amazing. They focus more on the medical side. We're more on the pharmacy side of things. Again, I'm a pharmacist, love drugs. I know how to sell drugs, and I understand the inner workings of this entire industry. I can tell you it's very disgusting, but again, that's primarily our focus is just on prescriptions.
Right, okay. Well, good to hear that's being tackled from two angles then. Well, thank you, James. Appreciate you coming over.
Thank you.
And I thought Amar was ready. Oh, he is. He is. There he is. Amar is going to come on, and there's going to be a similar thread here. So, I mean, it seems to me, having learned about crowd health, what's going on over there in the US, I only just heard what James has shared with us, and Amar is going to come up and talk about it as well. There's a lot that needs fixing, and it seems like Bitcoin could be the answer. So.